Hi everyone, Ted Wyman here with another edition of Jet Setting. And today we are going to be setting up an extremely big game, a playoff game during the regular season, no doubt about it. Winnipeg Jets versus Calgary Flames. As we record, the Flames are 2 points behind, but on this day they're playing in Chicago and are playing against Chicago, and there's a chance that will be a tie. Both teams tied going into a huge regular season game at the downtown arena in Winnipeg. And Scott Billeck joins me to talk about this one. They don't get much bigger in the regular season than this one, do they, Scott?
No, I mean, I was down there at the rink today for practice, and yeah, I mean, Adam Lowry called it a must-win. Dylan DeMello said they know the weight of this game. Rick Bowness called it a game 7, kind of feel to it. I mean, that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? I mean, this is a game where Rick Bowness said himself, I mean, he figures that, as you said off the top there, that, Calgary probably takes care of business on Tuesday night against Chicago, and comes into Winnipeg for the Wednesday night game level on points. And so it turns into a game where, the Jets, if they win tomorrow night, regardless of what happens tonight in Chicago, could, basically put a stranglehold on that final wild card. I mean, as it stands right now, I mean, it is a 2-point deficit, but truly it's 3 because the Jets hold the tie breaking implications, let's say, and because of that, there's no way that Calgary can overturn that before the season ends. So at this point, it is 3 points, and if they do come in tied tomorrow, a Jets win obviously puts them in the driver's seat, with Calgary only having 3 games remaining after tomorrow, and the Jets having 4. If Calgary wins tonight and then wins tomorrow, it changes the math, right? It changes everything. But the Jets would still have, I think it's important, I think at that point, to still suggest that the Jets would still have the the tiebreaker and the game in hand, which they could still win out. And if Calgary was to win out, and they've won 4 straight or 3 straight right now, or sorry, 4 straight right now, and they'll be looking to win their 5th in a row against Chicago. But the Jets, even if in a loss, and obviously they don't want to lose, but it would still have I guess the games in hand and the games, but their schedule isn't the same. I mean, the Jets close out the regular season against Minnesota, who clinched a playoff berth last night, or on Monday night, and beating Vegas, or losing to Vegas in the shootout, but clinching a playoff spot, in Colorado in the last game of the season, where yeah, I mean, I don't see the Jets. I don't see them winning. I see that's a tough schedule to have to win those games. So taking care of business on Wednesday night in downtown Winnipeg, as you said, that's where they need to do it. They've beaten Detroit, who came in on the back-to-back. They've beaten New Jersey now, who came in on the back-to-back. They scored 12 goals. They put the pedal to the metal against both of those teams. They didn't allow them to breathe. They didn't allow them to kind of work themselves into those games before they were leading by 4 or 5 goals in both of those games. And so that's, they know the blueprint, and they got to make it a hat trick on Wednesday night against another team, against a Calgary team who's been playing really good as of late, but is going to be coming into the game because they got to win tonight, and that's the thing. So they're going to be putting in a heck of an effort on Tuesday night against Chicago just to beat them, and they got to replicate it the night later. So it's a tough ask for Calgary, but we've seen this Jets team not up to the task before in these kind of big games, but they have been over the last, over the weekend. And I think that's what's important at this point. They are feeling good about their game. And so, yeah, here we are, biggest game of the year. And it could end there if they can beat them, I think. But we might be talking about more biggest games of the year if they can't. So
it's really incredible.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible what a difference a week makes, though, Scott. Last time we talked was right after the Jets had lost 3-0 in San Jose, and they just looked defeated. They looked terrible in that game. They looked like a team that had no motivation whatsoever as they tried to crawl towards a playoff spot, but they really did look different against Detroit. And I thought they looked extremely strong, like the team they were in the first half of the season against New Jersey. Yeah, both those teams were on back-to-backs, but you have to take advantage of those situations, and the Jets did that. And New Jersey is a good hockey team. Detroit had been playing good hockey as well. And the Jets really showed something, I think, to their fans, that they had the ability to make that happen in really important games. And it wasn't just a squeaker either. These were 6-2 and 6-1 games. They led both games by 6-0 scores. That's important. And, when you talk about that stretch situation next week, they've got San Jose, they got Nashville, another big game, although Nashville may be fading a little bit out of the picture, it seems. Another big game on Saturday, and then Monday they got the San Jose Sharks, who seem to be the team they can't beat. Maybe they're going to hope James Reimer's sick or something like that day, because they're going to need it. And then you mentioned Minnesota and Colorado. Well, then the one thing is Minnesota and Colorado have both clinched their playoff spots, and that's a situation where they may be resting some players. The Jets may be able to get some advantage out of that. And that's why I say this game against Calgary means so much, Scott. I mean, even if they're tied on points going into it, which seems likely to us, but it's not guaranteed.
Right.
You get ahead of them by 2. It really is 3. And you control your own destiny all the way. In fact, it would be more of a costly loss for Calgary than it would be for Winnipeg, because as you pointed out, Winnipeg will have a game in hand. So it really is huge. I think it's exciting. I don't think it needed to be this way. The Jets absolutely letting Calgary back into this thing, doing everything they can. But it's salvageable at this point, and that's all you can ask for, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, I think that's what you heard from the players today. It's like, they know what situation they put themselves in. And they also know, how to get out of it. And I asked Josh Morrissey this morning about, is there almost a little bit of a fight against the hype, right? I mean, this game is so big, the magnitude is so big, but in the dressing room, it just has to be another game. I mean, obviously, it's not that. But what he said, and I thought this was not the answer I was looking for, but almost the answer I expected from a guy like Josh Morrissey. And this time last year, they weren't playing games that meant anything, right? And he said these are the fun games. I mean, and that's true. I mean, this is not just a fun game, but it's an important game. And I think for this Jets team, who's played so well since shuffling their top 6 and kind of rejuvenating themselves, renewing their confidence in themselves, that sort of thing. It's more than just the 2 points. It's a chance for this team to string a third, basically 60-minute effort together, playing a certain style of game, an aggressive style of game that's really helped them win these past 2 games and kind of turn their season around a little bit since what we talked last, where it was all doom and gloom and blow everything up. And that still might come, right? I mean, this team has shown a lot of bad and as of late, and obviously the 2 wins and the recency bias that comes along with that, and the timing of those wins. I mean, that's obviously a huge thing for this team. I still expect some big changes this summer, but at the same time, I mean, this is a time that this team really needs to. They need to find it. They need to find this win tomorrow. They need to show that they can handle, kind of the bright lights of these moments. And I feel like they did that against Detroit. I feel like they really did that against New Jersey. But this is a different game. This is a much bigger game than both of those. And obviously, you don't win those 2 games. Calgary would have came in here ahead of them in points and maybe upwards of 4 points ahead of them. So, but this is the thing. The Jets have put themselves back in a position where they control their own destiny, but they have to go out and do it. You have to go out and beat a Calgary team that is playing really, really well. They're playing motivated. I mean, a 2-0 lead as they had against Vancouver, or they had in their last game against Anaheim. Or sorry, 2-0 deficit. They've overcome those in those games. So this is a team that's never out of it. This Calgary Flames team, and so the Jets have to be cognizant of that as well. And so it's Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, it's difficult to explain how big this game is. But at the same time, the Jets have to realize that they win this game, they can't lose their next four because Calgary could still catch them. So they have to really, they have to win this game, and then they got to win their next games, and that's the situation they're in at the moment. And one thing I'll say about those Minnesota and Colorado games, I still think there's going to be a lot on those riding on those games. Minnesota, they did clinch, yes, but I got to think Minnesota wants to play the second wild card, which would be the Winnipeg Jets at the moment, given how the regular season has gone. To do so, they need to finish first, and I don't know, they still can. It might be Vegas and Winnipeg at this point, but Minnesota's still
Or
going to want to
Edmonton
finish
or
first.
LA or
Yeah, well, that's it, right? And but Minnesota and Colorado are still wanting to finish first in the division, so they play one of the wild card teams, and they don't play each other, right? I mean, so there's still a lot to play for those top teams. So I'm not entirely sure that, yeah, there'll be some resting, I think, but at the same time, and there's still a lot to play for, at top of the division, just like there is at the bottom of the conference right now.
Well, and I look at it this way too. We've seen it before where a team came in hot into the playoffs, where the games meant something. Every single game down the stretch meant something, and you came in hot. There's a chance, and I'm just saying it's a chance because of the way the Jets played the last couple of games, that they're coming through the funk that was making them, really one of the worst teams in the NHL for the previous month or two, and that maybe you get hot at the right time. And then the playoffs, you've already been playing playoff games for a couple of weeks, and you come into it that way. I wanted to just touch on a couple of things. One was, the line changes. They've been looking for some combination that works for quite some time, and here they put finally it takes sort of a radical move, which is taking Mark Scheifele out of the center position, putting him on right wing with Pierre-Luc Dubois and Kyle Connor. Every team in the league would love to have a line like that, right? With a great big center and two snipers on the wings. That seemed to work really well. Blake Wheeler has come to life playing on a line with Vlad Nemesnikov and Nikolai Ehlers. And man, Nemesnikov's looking like a really nice pickup by the Jets for this stretch drive because he's so versatile. And here he is playing your second line center role and fitting in really well. So I just wanted to shout out to some of those players. We've been really hard on Blake Wheeler, and I think rightly so, because he really didn't look like a guy who had much left in the tank for the last couple of weeks. But he's played really well the last couple of games, and obviously I thought physically he looked really good. He made good little plays in small spaces. Those things just are so important when you're coming down the stretch, and if he can be even close to what he's been in the past, it could mean a lot for the Jets. And one more thing just to mention, Scott, it's Pride Night at the arena on Wednesday night. The Jets have indicated that all of the players will be taking part in Pride Night, where they're expected to all wear these special jerseys. It's pretty important for the team to come out and say that right now, isn't it, Scott? Given that there's a lot of other teams around the league that either canceled their Pride Nights. They had players like James Reimer, who we mentioned before, saying that they didn't want to do it. They weren't comfortable with it for religious reasons. You've had some teams saying that that Russian players couldn't do it because of the implications back home. Your thoughts on what it means for the Jets to come out and say that they're going to participate in this?
I mean, I think first and foremost, it really it helps in the community, right? I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, and I'll talk about the second biggest thing in a second here, but the biggest thing for me is this shows that this team backs up what it does off the ice, right? I mean, whoever, I'm sure, like every other dressing room in this NHL, that there's a difference of opinion on some of these things, and I'm sure that permeates in the Jets dressing room as well. I mean, we shouldn't be blind to the fact that there might be a player or two that maybe doesn't agree with it, but there's something bigger at work here, right? And I think Adam Lowry put it maybe the best this morning, in my opinion, that he said, like, even through this controversy, like the fact that there was the biggest throng of media today that there has been since maybe training camp, right? The first 2 days of training camp, or maybe the first game of the season, like that shows, like, I mean, even out of the controversy that this has spawned, like it's almost still putting the light on the issue, right, and bringing more attention and awareness to it. So I think that's important, and I think the team, backing up, the True North Foundation and Project 11 and all those things, the inclusivity. I mean, for this team to have done it the other way, to maybe not have worn the jerseys or whatever, like, I think, this team is so ingrained in the fabric of the community, this city, that this is the right move. And I think the other choice would have been detrimental, not just to the on ice product, and I'll get to that in a second, but to the off ice product, to the image of True North, to the image of this team and the community and that sort of thing. So I think that's important. I think the other side of this too for the Jets is that, whatever they believed, and at the end of the day, whatever, I mean, if there was some dissension among the ranks or whatever, for the betterment of the team at the moment, the last thing this team needed going into this game was not only that, but the distraction that the distraction that this would have caused heading into this game. And I can only imagine, having this. I mean, you're seeing it right now with the Leafs on Tuesday. They're doing it, but the Leafs are in a playoff spot. They're not a problem. And so to have this happen at the same time where you're about to play your biggest game of the year, if that was the case, I think it would have been a disaster. I mean, I think you would have, because rightly so, they would have been questioned on it, asked about all that stuff, right? And it creates this massive distraction that they don't need at the moment. This team is just coming off a couple of its best games of the year in terms of, getting back to it. They've had this kind of renaissance of goal scoring and that sort of thing. Last thing they needed was to throw a spike strip out and deflate the tires of it all, right? I mean, that's honestly what I think, on that. And so, I think it's good for the team on the ice and off the ice. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing is that it shows that this team, over, the way that it's been across the NHL this season, controversy has been, I think it's nice and it's commendable to the Jets team that there, even if there are differences of opinion, that they could come together and come to an agreement that we're going to wear these jerseys and show that we care about the community, regardless of our own individual beliefs, that we accept everybody and that sort of thing. And I think that's a big thing for this team, for just going forward. I mean, it's been a tenuous situation all season across the league, and I think it was a big deal for the Jets to come out today on Tuesday and kind of say we're with you, or whatever you want to call it. Like, I think they sent a message today, and so I mean, I assume that's going to be the way it is tomorrow for warm up. And we've been told that they expect all that, and they're not using stick tape, but I believe they're all going to wrap one of their sticks with stick tape and put those up for auction too. So I mean, this is the thing, and Rick Bowness said it too. I mean, he runs his own golf charity tournament back in Nova Scotia, and he talked about he does it for underprivileged kids, but there's no discrimination there based on sex, sexual orientation, all that stuff. Socioeconomic status. Like, hockey is one of the most barrier-filled games to kind of get people into it. The costs are so high, all that stuff. The last thing you need to do is add another one of based on your gender or your sex or your sexual orientation and all that. And so I think for this team to do what they're doing, I think it's important. I think at the end of the day, the players who spoke today, the players that made this decision, and I think that's it's a commendable thing at the end of the day, based on the kind of the environment that's been around the league all season.
Well said, Scott. I appreciate that, and I think it's going to be a very interesting stretch drive here for the Jets. At least they've made it that. They could have made it a lot less interesting, no doubt about it. At one time, we thought they'd be battling for first place at this point, but now they're settling pretty much for a wild card playoff spot and a battle for it at that. But that comes down to, we'll know a lot more after Wednesday night, let's put it that way, when they play the Calgary Flames. So for Scott Billeck, I'm Ted Wyman. Thanks for watching Jet Setting on WinnipegSun.com.